All right. Thanking God again for giving us the chance to approach the end of Acts. Let's call Acts chapter 22, Jerusalem, the crowd. Understanding that, once again, we said that Paul's first stop, at least this far on his final missionary journey, is going to be in Jerusalem, where he is going to have two hearings. Acts 22 gives us the first of those two, the hearing he is going to have before the crowd, before he is dragged away from that crowd that tried to kill him. Where in verses 1 through 2, it picks up from where we left off, where he addresses the crowd in Hebrew, and the respect that they began to give him as he motioned to try to speak to them is going to be enhanced, as we said, by the fact that he's able to speak to them in Hebrew. And so verses 1 and 2 are going to help us see that they quiet down even more, giving him the chance to speak. And in verses 3 through 11, he is going to give a brief history, as Paul often does in his speeches, at least the ones we have recorded in Acts, as he is going to say that he is a Jewish man from Tarsus, trained by one of their famous teachers, Gamaliel, persecuting the way to the death. He is going to say he wasn't just a student, he was active in trying to stamp out the thing that they are now associating him with. And by that charge, he is guilty of being associated with it, but there's a reason. And so even though the elders can verify that he was active in trying to get rid of the way, which is what the Christians are called, he was so active that he was chasing them down outside of Jerusalem to Damascus, where a great light hits him. He's going to tell them that that light was from Jesus, starting the point at which he made his pivot away from harassing them to actually joining them, after he understands that the Christ is going to order him to go to Damascus before a very different reason. And for lack of a better term, he's going to tell him to go there to get his orders as to what he is going to do once he gets his sight back, because he is going to go to Jerusalem blinded, where in verses 12 through 16, he's going to go to Damascus blinded, where in verses 12 through 16, a respected man by the name of Ananias is going to restore his sight, help him understand his mission, which is going to be a witness for God to everyone, Ananias is going to say, and then he is going to baptize him. And Paul's pivot is not going to make him welcomed in Damascus, because they knew why he was supposed to be there. At least his friends or the folks he was working with knew why he was supposed to be there. So he actually, as you see in more detail in the story of his time in Damascus, is actually going to pivot and damage the work they were trying to do against the way. So as he is booted out of Damascus, he is going to go back to Jerusalem, but his pivot is going to make him no more welcomed in Jerusalem as he was in Damascus, and no more welcome than he is now, as verses 17 through 21 are going to describe the way that Jesus warns him that things are about to get really bad for him in Jerusalem, even though he is going to recall the way that Paul is going to recall the way that his roots run deep there. He actually participated in killing Stephen, but Christ is going to warn him that is not going to be enough to keep him safe. And so he is going to tell him to go to the Gentiles, at which point when Paul tells the crowd that his orders from Christ were to go to the Gentiles, they're going to hear another word, apparently uncomfortable with the fact, much like Peter was, that the word of God or the things of God were supposed to be sent out beyond Israel. They're going to cut him off and start the killing again. And even though they're not going to get a chance to kill him, they're going to start to try to mob him again, at which point in verses 22 through 29, the tribune is going to step in again and pull him out of the crowd to save him. But before he gets too comfortable, he's not saving him because he loves him. He still wants to get to the truth, meaning the tribune still wants to find out why they're so angry with him. And so he is going to try to examine Paul by flogging, at which point Paul's going to be like, wait. Is it legal to beat a Roman citizen under these circumstances? At which point the tribune is going to be like, no, it's not. And the chapter is going to end up, however, with the tribune still wanting to get to the bottom of why they are upset. He's going to tell them that on the next day they need to assemble a council to get to the real reason why they want to kill Paul. And within all of that, the thing that might have most caught my attention about this chapter was the point at which things turned bad for Paul, even though the crowd was willing to hear him address them in Hebrew. And it was the point at which he said that he was commanded to take things that they otherwise considered for them and carry them out to the Gentiles, understanding it wasn't going to cost them a dime. It reminded me of this. And of course, I'm going to butcher this proverb because I didn't take the time to look it up, but I once heard a gentleman, I think a preacher, trying to describe the struggle that he was having in helping folks become more evangelistic. It's basically being a dilemma of people seeing seeing themselves more as ponds or lakes as opposed to streams. See, ponds and lakes have their own value, but they are not able to carry blessings much beyond their boundaries. And so understand that in trying to reach his audience, he was trying to persuade them that God was calling us to be more like streams and rivers than ponds and lakes, simply storing up what we believe he has blessed us with for our own resources or for our own benefit. And understand, in much the same way, it seems that Paul, as he is looking at the blessings that Israel has at this time as a stream that is supposed to lead out, just as Christ has said in the very first chapter to his apostles, a stream or a river that is going to lead out beyond Jerusalem to Samaria, to Judea, then to Samaria, then to the ends of the earth. They are not trying to hear it. And understand the way that their perspective on what Paul is trying to say is not harming Paul or the Gentiles. It's already going to get out because that's what God has purposed. What they are doing is harming themselves, as we have seen throughout the book of Acts, as the places where they refuse to acknowledge their purpose as more of a stream or a river than a pond or a lake. They are watching the Gentiles grow in the power of God in ways that they simply aren't, because they are stagnating, more like ponds would tend to stagnate, as opposed to allowing the Spirit to flow through them. Understanding that God hands out gifts according to his will. And they are in an era or period of time where God is doing things a new way. And so even though they have been exceedingly blessed, even though they are under Roman rule, they've gotten a lot of freedom under Roman rule, but God is moving in ways that they are not willing to go. And so what they are starting to experience is the frustration of seeing those who they do not expect to be blessed, passing them by as a bunch of simple Galileans are beginning to perform the kinds of works and miracles that they simply can't. And now it's getting worse because even though they have driven them out of Jerusalem, they have to be getting word that through people like Paul, they are now starting to see evidence that people who aren't even in Israel are starting to do the kinds of things that they can't do. And to make it worse, those who were once working with them are turning and siding with those who are experiencing or receiving gifts that are reminding them of what they are, as we've said in previous chapters, what they are lacking. And Paul's success amongst the Gentiles after deserting them has to make that feel that much worse. For that reason, even though they give him a hearing when he speaks in Hebrew, that whole concept of Paul taking more blessings out to the Gentiles seems to strike a nerve. And so they shut down Paul's ability to speak, quite possibly missing the irony that their commitment to clutch those things that God has meant for them to share has likewise shut down their ability to